With WWE 2K23 on the horizon, it's time for us to take a look back at 2K23, a game we've played an awful lot, and see what we thought. Hello there, welcome to saberduelgaming, where we always take the high ground, and welcome to our retro review of WWE 2K23. Now, retro review, that's something of a stretch. I know it's literally 1 year old. However, I didn't know what else to call it. It's not exactly a review because they normally come out when the game is first released, so just bear with me on that. WWE 2K23 is a game we have played lots over the past year, and it's well established that I generally do a lot of wrestling content on my channel as well. WWE2K16 was, as I've mentioned numerous times before, the first ever retro review I did, so it only makes sense as I play these games one by one, I review them at the end of the year, and 2K23 is no different. And no different is a particularly key phrase at play here. These games don't usually change a great deal from one edition to the next. The majority of the basic controls, the character designs, pretty much everything stays the same, with minor updates to the roster, a few new match types, and the game modes getting a few tweaks here and there, and that's generally what we've got here too. I'm not going to go into a massive amount of detail about the way the game plays because I'd just be saying things I've said numerous times in other versions of the game. So all I would say is it generally plays about the same way as last year's WWE game did. We get the same cool fancy entrances, we get the same fantastic looking arenas, or at least as fantastic as they can be considering how generic WWE's arenas now look in real life. But overall, all those cool entrances that you like are still there. I will say, and this is a key point to talk about graphics because the entrance is where you get to really enjoy those at their best, that the graphics haven't massively improved or increased in quality since the last game, and that's particularly interesting considering we've moved from the PlayStation 4 to PlayStation 5 in me playing them, and I don't really notice a massive shift from one console to the other. However, that said, the graphics are as good as I could want them to be, and I don't really have any major gripe with this. The cool, over-the-top, oh my god type moment spots are still in the game, as you would come to expect. However, they are pretty much the same ones you might have seen in the last version of the game. You can do flaming tables and high spots inside Hell in a Cell, but all of these are pretty much the same, and it does lack the freedom of variety that you might have seen in some of the older wrestling games. In fact, the WWE 2K series in general has lacked this. Instead of being able to do whatever fancy move you want to do to put someone through a ladder or a table, instead it goes to a sort of pre-programmed move, which does take out the spontaneity and excitement of it. In fact, when doing streams, I'm very aware that I'm doing high spots that are visible in every single stream that I do. The controls themselves remain really tight, easy to pick up and play and get into. For those that haven't played the game for a long time, when they come around and have a game with me, it's pretty clear it doesn't take them very long to pick it all up. So I suppose that goes to show that the controls are pretty intuitive and pretty easy to use. That's got to be a positive. And the game modes, well, you have a whole range of match types you can use. TLC, ladder matches, and for the first time ever, we're introduced to war games. This is fun to use, a great deal of fun in fact, but it can get a little bit irritating, especially if you start right at the beginning. By the time the match even really begins, your character is pretty much knackered and just completely devoid of energy, making it difficult to do anything that's particularly exciting or any of the high spots you may want to achieve. But what about the actual game modes? Well, my GM mode is one of the most common ones, especially what you will see on my channel. My GM mode allows you to take over as a GM on a brand in WWE and run it, book it however you want. This time around we have access to multiple versions of NXT and even WCW with Eric Bischoff as a GM. You can book a lot more different match types this time around, including the usual Hell in a Cell, TLC, tables, tornado tags, falls count anywhere, Iron Man, and of course as you work through it, you can do all the different pay-per-views you'd like. Then of course there is also the My Rise mode. There's two different stories within this, with The Lock being the key one that I played through as, and this isn't something I've done on the previous games, to be honest. The annoying part of this is having to design your own character. I personally would really like to play through the story of a character, but picking a wrestler I already like and care about. My generic guy, The Lock, sort of made it a little bit less engaging. However, seeing his initial debut with a really goofy safe bursting open and the lock coming out was kind of entertaining. And then as you watch the character, instead of just doing what you would expect and succeeding in WWE, failing and ending up having to earn his keep on the independent circuit, travelling around the world, unlocking different arenas with fake versions of New Japan Pro Wrestling, really good. And of course, as always, we have the showcase mode, and this time around we are seeing John Cena. Well, if you can see him, that is, of course. John Cena being quite a polarizing character in WWE, they decided to make the call that instead of playing as John Cena, you play against John Cena. So each match you play as, you're playing as a different wrestler, fighting John Cena, and as you beat him, competing and completing the different targets and goals it sets you, you finally unlock that version of John Cena, that arena, and other characters and other looks for characters as you go along. It is quite a lot of fun to do, and I like that they went this route, although I think it would have been a really nice touch if you got to choose whether you played as or against John Cena, because there's still a lot of people out there that really like the guy. The game has a load of other game modes, including online game modes, that one where you collect the cards, which I really just don't understand, and of course you can customize and create your own characters or download characters that other people have made. This really does add a lot of variety to the game. But what about the negatives? Well, the game does have a fair few glitches, nowhere near as many as you would see in some of the previous games, but quite often you will find one of your character's arms randomly bending backwards or jerking around uncontrollably, making the actual game look a little bit ridiculous. There's also been a few times, and it's only happened when I've been streaming, when during my GM mode, the game will just effectively freeze between two cutscenes, and that's happened several times. And of course we have the DLC issue. This game is not cheap, at least it wasn't when it was released. There was multiple versions of it that you had to pay even more for if you wanted all of the additional wrestlers and content. And then on top of that, there was a whole range of DLCs that were released one at a time. This is really annoying, especially when some of those wrestlers would have been available to the company right from the start. They could have put them in if they wanted to, they just didn't want to. They want to make you pay extra, which just feels like an absolute scam considering the amount you're paying in the first place. There's also the issue that a lot of the characters within the game, the Legends characters, you have to buy either with real money or using in-game currency, and that in-game currency takes absolutely forever to build up. But what makes it worse? The majority of those Legend characters are ones you previously owned in the last game. In many cases, they haven't even given them the new look. It's the exact same character you've already bought before, and now they want you to buy a new game so that you have to buy them all over again. I'd say this was a major flaw within the WWE2K series, however, it's not a flaw, it's by design, and it works, because we keep buying them, and we keep buying the DLC. As long as we do that, and I include myself in it, why should they stop? But all that aside, how was this game received on its release? Well, it generally garnered scores between 7.5 to 8 out of 10, with the vast majority of the scores being 8 out of 10 or 80%. The comments generally favoured towards the fact that there was a bit more flexibility and some minor improvements over previous games, but not much else besides that, which is kind of fair. It should also be noted that the game has been nominated for the Sports Game of the Year Award in the 27th Annual DICE Awards, although that hasn't actually taken place yet, so whether or not the game will actually win that award is yet to be seen. But in general, it's all pretty positive. So what did I think of the game? It's hardly really worth considering it a looking back with hindsight, but looking back over this past year, well, as much as part of me wants to moan and gripe about the lack of actual changes and improvement over the previous games, I've played the game every single week since I got it. Whether I was doing streams or not, whether it was my GM mode, the showcase, my rise, whether it was me doing particular custom belts, whatever it was, I've used this game, and I've also bought the DLCs, so as much as I gripe and complain about those points, it stood up well. Overall, 2K23 has been a good game. The issues I have with it are not really an issue with this game, they're an issues with this type of game, this sports annual release. So putting that to one side, this game as a standalone, it does deserve the score of 8 out of 10, which is what pretty much everyone else gave it, and I still think it deserves that now. With some bigger changes, and certainly a hell of a lot less paid for DLC, this game could easily get a 9 out of 10 or higher, but overall, it's still pretty damn good. But what do you think? How do you think this game stands up to previous wrestling games? Comment below, let me know, and until next time, take the high ground.